One in Three is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, Warriors. Welcome to One in Three. I'm your host, Ingrid. This year marks the 5th year the National Network to End Domestic Violence has carried the theme for Domestic Violence Awareness Month of Everyone Knows Someone. Today's episode embodies that message in an incredibly powerful way. This is not my story to tell, so I invite you to join me in welcoming my guest, Devyn. Hi, Devyn. Welcome to One in Three. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I know kind of the whole episode is going to be your background, but is there any little bit of a background you want to give to start out with?
Sure. I'll give you my background as far as where I am right now. So I live in a Milwaukee area, Wisconsin. I've been married for 3 years, and I just had my first child. I had a daughter a year ago. Charlotte is her name. And right now I'm home with her full time, which has been both the biggest challenge and also the biggest blessing. Just kind of being with her all the time and just learning so much from her, which has been really special. My husband works as an anesthesiologist outside of the house, and we have also one dog, Ginger. I come from a very big blended family. So my parents were divorced when I was young, like 4, maybe 5 years old. And so I never really remember them together. But my dad got remarried, and I have 2 half-siblings from his marriage there. So we've always been a little chaotic, very blended, but a lot of love, like all across the board. As far as like other parts of my childhood, I grew up in a small town called Mourned, Wisconsin. It's literally a village. And when I was growing up there, our population was literally unincorporated. So it was so tiny, but so charming. I grew up on my grandparents' cranberry marsh, where we didn't really have neighbors like for miles, and our only real neighbors were my grandma's house on one side and my uncle's house on the other side. So I grew up very close with my uncles, aunts, grandparents, and cousins, which was just like such a special way to grow up. After I graduated high school, I went to UW La Crosse, got my undergrad, lived and worked in Madison for a few years in corporate HR, which was, again, a great learning experience. It's a special type of job, I would say. I went on to get my MBA at Whitewater while I was still working full-time. And then, of course, as everyone knows, COVID happened, and that's actually when I met my husband. So, yeah, it was a bit of a whirlwind. We were together for a year, engaged, married the next year, and now here we are 5 years later with our daughter, our dog, and our home.
How did you guys meet?
We actually met on Hinge.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
I love that.
as grim as the dating apps look out there, it does work sometimes.
Right.
Yeah, one of the lucky ones there.
Oh, for sure. For sure. There's a lot more horror stories, I think, than success stories.
For sure.
Okay. So part of the reason you're joining me today is to talk about family, and specifically your mom.
Yes.
And she was a nurse. And now I grew up in Toma, which for a lot of people listening are going to have no idea where Toma or Warrens is, but we at least did have population. I think
Right. I did have to go there for school. So.
Right. So I think we had like a population of around 8,000 when I went to high school, but very small town. Kind of everybody knows everything about everyone there. Yeah. And even now,
yes.
I graduated 30 years ago, and I still know a lot about people. I don't live there. I live in Tennessee, and I still know a lot about a lot of people there. But so your mom was a nurse at the hospital, the local hospital?
Yes, the only hospital.
Yes.
In like
Well, yes.
30-mile radius.
Right. That is true. That's true. So, do you want to talk a little bit about, actually just before we get into like the whole domestic violence end of the story, but just talk about her as who she was?
Yes. Well, I have so much to say about her. And I'll disclaim this like for the duration of this podcast in that I share what I remember today. And that kind of changes day to day. That's one interesting thing I have found about not just like memory, but like trauma and the way you remember things. So it's not that I am making things up as I go. It's just this is what I literally remember today, 16 years later. So it's been 16 years since I've seen my mom or heard her voice. And what I remember of her today is, first of all, her sense of humor was, well, as a teenager, it was irritating. But I have such an appreciation for it now because I've come to understand that's just how she kind of, coped with life in some ways where you just can't be so serious and just laughing things off, making corny jokes, kind of annoying your kids because you're trying to connect with them. And as a mom now, I really understand. I really understand that so much better. And now that I do, I just appreciate that about her now, like so much more because I think it allowed her to just carry on the day to day with such a good attitude. My mom never really like sat and felt like woe is me or sorry for herself, like regardless of the circumstances. She was like a strong-willed, like a glass half full like attitude, and it was very infectious. Coupled with that was her smile was also very infectious. Her smile and laugh were very infectious, but when I talk to other people about her now, so many of them will mention that about her, where it's like, oh, your mom just like lit up the room, and it like her smile or her laugh or her humor, whatever it was, she had such a presence. And that carried through her career as well. She was an OB nurse. So like the most vulnerable time in a woman's life is when you're giving birth. And she was literally made for that. She was just wonderful at it to the point where we would, go through the only grocery store in our hometown Walmart at the time. And people I had never met before would stop us and say, you delivered my son or my daughter. And like, she just made such an impact on people in like such a good way in like such a vulnerable time of a woman's life. And I just really admired that about her because I'm sure it wasn't effortless, but it seemed that way. It just seemed so natural for her to just treat people with such dignity, respect, and just the ability to like listen when someone is talking to her. It's what everybody can hear, right? Like you can hear people talking, but it's different when you know that somebody's actually listening to you. And I feel like that's something that she really had just mastered. So all qualities that I think the world needs a little bit more of now. Of course, we didn't have like all the technology that we have today to distract us, but I often will humble myself in moments where I'm distracted by thinking about like what kind of person do I want to be and what do I want my daughter to absorb? That's a priority now too. So I find myself now as a mother thinking about what my mother did, how she acted, how she carried herself, and just like trying to embody that as much as possible. Brings me like a certain type of fulfillment and joy because it almost feels like she's involved in some ways because I'm trying to like carry on the way that she carried herself. The other like really funny thing, not funny, but my mom was only 5'2", so she was a short gal, but she was incredibly strong. Like so strong. And like for jokes and for fun at holidays, she would want to arm wrestle all the men in the family just to see if she could beat them. Like, and she really would like give them a run for their money. And we all just like just laughed about it because she was like half serious, half not. She had a little bit of a competitive edge to her. She was extremely present in my life and my brother's life when it came to our sports, our academics, just like always kind of pushing us to do better than we did the day before, which is something that I think stuck with both of us. And of course, as a kid, your parents are annoying and it's like, what's wrong with my B and why do you want me to get an A and all this? And it all came from a place of just wanting what was best for us. And she always, at the end of the day, regardless, made us feel loved. And I think that's really all like kids need. Like they just need to feel loved and to feel seen and heard. And she just, again, it like came so naturally to her. Like she was incredible at all of that and balancing, like pushing us to be better human beings and like contributing to the world in a way that would be productive and kind. And so I could ramble all day about her, but she was special. Like I find that I haven't found anyone quite like her. And maybe I'm biased because that was my mom, but yeah, she was just incredibly special. And I think the community and people around us felt that too.
For sure. I think that when you have a person like what you described your mom to be, that push that she like actually was consciously doing with you and your brother, she probably also just subconsciously nudged everyone else around her to want to be better people themselves. It's individuals like that just have this, they just give off this energy, this happy energy that people feed off of, but then like feed off in a good way. That's beautiful. That's a really beautiful way to describe your mom. And listening to you describe her, I'm being brought to my kids and how annoying I am to my kids.
Annoying.
I love all of that about your mom. And I think it's really important to point out that she had such a big impact on your life, your brother's life, and then the community. And that's something that really needs to be recognized, that there's not just one person that is affected by violence.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was. And I'm sure you can relate to this too, but it's especially impactful when you grow up in a small town.
Yes.
Like you were saying earlier, everybody knows everybody.
Right.
Or somebody knows of somebody. And just the sheer ripple effect seems so much greater almost in like a smaller town because you make connections with like such a large majority of it. Whereas, you're not just like a fish in like the sea, you're more of like a fish in a pond, so to speak.
Right.
You run into the other fish in the pond, but maybe you miss them in the sea. So yeah, you nailed it. It's so much greater than just me or just my family. It's like impact the community.
And do you want to go into a little bit about what happened?
Yeah. Again, this is what I remember today. I don't practice any of this. I don't look back at newspapers and I don't Google my name. All that. But yeah, so I think a little context is important here in that I mentioned earlier my biological parents. So my mom and my dad got divorced when I was young. And I had always had a good relationship with my dad, and he was very much part of our lives. We saw him every other weekend. He was like at our sporting events. Like he definitely loved us. I don't want to say from afar, but there was just some distance from where he lived and where we lived for like a period of time. But there was always they co-parented really well and all of that. So my dad got remarried, but my mom also got remarried. So I think I was 8 when they got remarried. She got married to who was my stepfather, Brent. And 8 is still like very much kid age. And so he was like he lived in our house. Like he, in some ways, was like around when we were being raised, and, you know, came to our sport events here and there. Like he was like a big part of our lives. And he never had kids of his own. So we were just, me and my brother were kind of like, quote unquote, his kids, when we were growing up at such like a young age. So, the thing about Brent was, there was so much that I didn't like really realize about him when I was a child that I understand now as an adult. One of those things was I didn't recognize a temper that he had. I know my brother had witnessed or heard him say a couple of things that kind of alluded to him having a short fuse, but he was never violent towards us. I never saw him be violent towards my mother. What I did see from him was he was very aloof. So we had like a shed like in our, like as part of our property, and he had kind of sort of like a man cave of sorts in the shed. And he spent a lot of time back there, and playing his guitar or throwing darts or whatever. And one thing that I just like never thought much of it, but as an adult, I know that he was in the shed drinking, and just like away from us. So what I realize now is he was just a sorts of like high functioning alcoholic, where, one memory I have very vividly, is we were camping with my mom, my stepdad. It was me, my mom, my stepdad, and my brother. And he opened a beer at 10 o'clock in the morning. And my mom like got emotional. Like one thing about my mom is I can truly count on like one hand how many times I saw her cry. She was just she really kind of like kept it together, especially in front of us kids. And it was me and her in the camper, and she's like crying, and I'm like trying to understand like why are you crying? There was like an exchange, and then he left, and so it was just us at the campsite. And I don't remember specifically what she said, but it was almost like in that moment I realized like what was wrong, because there's always like this underlying issue, it seemed, but I never could quite put my finger on it. And maybe it's because I was a very young teenager, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention or didn't know what I was looking for. But it was kind of in that moment that I felt something bigger was going on here. So to make that a long story short, my mom ended up filing for divorce after they were married for 7 or 8 years. So like a long time they were together. And I remember him moving out of our house and not being 100% sure why, other than they weren't happy together anymore, and they were just like going their separate ways. Like that's what I understood about it. So then fast forward, I would say roughly a month or two, and it was July 22nd, 2009. My brother was off at a motocross race with my uncle and my cousins, and so it was just me and mom at home, and we were doing our usual wind down routine at night, where I was tucked into bed, promised breakfast in bed for my birthday the next day, which I always looked forward to. And then, it was kind of like lights out. Mom was, getting herself ready for bed, and I was almost asleep. It was late. It's like maybe 10-ish o'clock at night. I was almost asleep, whatever time it was. And I heard a really loud knock on the door, which I found in that moment to be like really odd, because we grew up so far out in the country that we never locked our door, for one. Like I never had a house key growing up. We were just like lived in this safe community where my neighbors were my grandparents and my aunt and uncle, and whoever was coming would just walk through the front door. So I thought that was like very odd, that someone was like knocking really loud on the door. So I was like, oh, mom must have like locked the door. I didn't think much of it, kind of rolled over. And I heard her walk past my room, because we had our bedrooms upstairs and then there was the main level. Heard her walk past my room, go downstairs to, like see who was there. And then I heard her scream and the door hit the wall. And so I was immediately awake. I jumped up out of bed. I shut my door and locked it. And then I called 911 right away, and I didn't even know what was going on. I just know that when you hear someone scream like that, you are 100% sure that something is wrong. You're just not sure what. And so I'm talking to the 911 operator, and I'm also listening to see if I can figure out why is my mom screaming. And then I hear like a man's voice, and it's more of like, it's like they're having a heated discussion, like they're yelling at each other. And I'm like I'm trying to like figure out who that is. And then I hear my mom say like, I tried for 8 years. And then I was like, okay. And then I heard the man's voice, and I'm like, okay, it's Brent. Like I realized like who it is now. And I couldn't figure out why my mom was so scared. Like I knew she was scared. I could hear it in her voice without even like seeing her. But when I realized who it was almost like this moment of like, do I open the door? Because I know who Brent is. It's not like there's an intruder in our house and I have like no idea who it is. I don't. I don't know if it was like flight, fight, freeze like moment for me, but I was like laser focused on getting the cops there like as quickly as possible. And so it's felt like an eternity for them to get there. But while they were having their argument, I'm like telling them like, oh, like here's like what I can hear and like what's going on. And then I heard like this really loud bang, and it's like a sound that I've never heard like from the inside of my house. So I thought like a cupboard door had slammed shut, or like the stool from the kitchen table had like fallen on the floor or something like that. And then I heard it again. And then I was like, I realized like, oh, that was a gun. Like there's a gun in our house. Like my stepfather has a gun. And so I'm like telling the police, like, please hurry. We live in the middle of nowhere. This stuff took time back then. And I can still hear them yelling despite like these two gunshots. The second one actually went up the stairs. I kind of like past my bedroom. I could hear it. And there was some more arguing. I heard some glass breaking, and then there was a third gunshot, and then I heard a thump, and then I heard nothing. Like it was silent. And then I didn't see him get in his truck, but I saw him like drive away from our house, and it still was like so quiet. And so I opened my bedroom door, and I looked down the stairs, which our dining room was right. Like you could see it, like looking down the stairs is where our dining room was. And my mom was like laying face down on the floor, and I'm yelling. I said, "Mom," and she didn't answer me. And so I start walking down the stairs to get closer to her, and I feel wood chips on my feet from like where the bullet had like hit the stairs. And the smell like of gunpowder was just like so strong in the house. And I yelled again. I said, "Mom," and she didn't move. She didn't answer me. And I could like see this shadow next to her. And then it took like a moment, and I realized like that shadow is actually blood, and she wasn't responsive. And so I get scared, and I basically like begging these people, like the first responders, police officers, like, please get here like as soon as you can. And I go back in my room and wait, and it's not long after that they show up. And at that moment, it was just like, it was such like a surreal out of body experience. I couldn't even comprehend what just happened or what was happening. And I just remember like a police officer coming upstairs to like see if I was okay. And they're working on her downstairs. So now they have me upstairs and her downstairs, and like no one's like really going anywhere. At that point, I think they got a sheet and they're like, you know, like holding it up so they could like protect me from like seeing them like work on her and like get her to the hospital like as quickly as possible. So that's all happening. And then, you know, they like send her off in the ambulance. And I remember I had to use my house phone, if you can believe that, to call my grandma, who was my neighbor, so my mom's mom. And I had to tell her what just happened. And so she comes down. I'm still not able to leave the house. She can't come in. Like it's so chaotic. And everybody's kind of like just doing their best at this point. Finally, they're able to kind of escort me out of the house. And I just remember they put oxygen over my face. And I didn't really understand why. But I was like struggling to breathe because it's just like I had no control over what my body, like how my body was responding to everything I just like heard and saw. So we go straight to the hospital. Meanwhile, my stepfather is still just like driving around in his truck. Police are looking for him, all of that. He ends up running into like a parked car, and he was like double or triple the blood alcohol limit. So he is in custody. You know, like that part is, honestly, that was secondary. All we were worried about was like, is our mom okay? And so we go to the hospital, the same one where she worked, brought life into the world every day, every week. And we just sat in the emergency waiting room. And it was like this big group of our family, like everybody. Even my dad was like driving in the car on his way from like way out of town, just like be with us. And we sat there for like an eternity. It felt like Ingrid have no idea how long we were in that waiting room. I just felt like forever. And then just like a scene out of the movies, the doctor comes out of the double doors of the ER and says like, I'm so sorry. Like we did everything we could do. And I remember like watching everyone around me like understandably like break down and cry. And I couldn't. It was almost like I was frustrated that I couldn't. But I was so numb to what I just saw. Like the gravity of it hadn't hit me. And I was almost like, I should be crying right now. It's like I can't. So we couldn't go home because our home was a crime scene. It was the only house we ever lived in. That's where we grew up. And so we ended up actually like staying at the hospital. They got us a room, and me and my brother crammed together in one of those tiny hospital beds and just like laid next to each other. And I just remember like we were looking at the clock. I don't know if it was midnight or 2 a.m, but he just like kind of nudged me and said like, happy birthday, Dad. And it was like so sincere. And then after that, it was like, it was so intense. It was like the most massive whirlwind like ever. And I just remember like wondering like, where are we gonna live? Because like we can't go home. And honestly, like even living with my grandma was probably not a good idea for me at the time because she was right next to our house. Like for me, it was like almost like being as far away from that as possible was kind of like probably what was needed at the time. I don't remember making a lot of these decisions because I probably didn't. I was a teenager, freshly like 15. So our family and friends just like really stepped up and like did whatever they needed to do to protect us. So my dad's mom also lives in Toma. So we ended up staying with her for like a period of time so we could like figure out our living situation. My dad had to move from several hours away back to Toma and then like figure out like what are we going to do? How are we going to do this? And I was like so thankful for him. Because he had like this whole other like this part of his family that was also being like impacted by this, because now two of his kids like don't have a mom. So like now what do I do when I have these other two kids? And it was like very intense. And so the next day we're at my dad's mom's house, my grandma Sue's. And I called my godmother, who is my mom's best friend, Cindy, and who, by the way, is still like a huge part of my life. And I'm like so thankful for her. But I remember calling her and like for the first time, like saying out loud, like what happened, like telling her what I just told you. And I finally could cry. It was like those like hot tears that like you can like feel in your bones almost. And it was like in that moment, that's how long it took for me to like feel the emotion that I like needed to feel, like a release, because it became so real. Like when I had to tell someone what happened, it didn't feel like this bad dream anymore. It was like, oh no, like this is real life. She's actually gone. And like I actually just saw that. The funeral was difficult because my mom was only 37. So usually at 37, you don't have arrangements like put together. So we kind of did our best and did like what we thought that she would want. And I remember like even her wake, like looking at her in the casket and like just didn't look like her. I don't know that anyone ever really looks like themselves after they pass, but that was also like very difficult for me to see her like so still and just like not her color, and she just looked so not herself. So it's almost like in that way I felt like, I don't even know if I felt like I really got to say goodbye to her, because it didn't even like look like her. But I remember at her wake there was like, I'm not joking, like hours of people, like lines of people like showing up for her. And that's where like I really understood her impact in the community, is like the sheer volume of people that like came to say their goodbyes to her was so, it was like shocking, but also like so special. Because I was like, wow, I'm not the only one who thought like she was so special. You know, you try to like realize your own bias, but like when I could see these people like showing up for her, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is like so much bigger than like I thought, like so much bigger than like just our little family. And we had our funeral, and you know, she was buried like 2 miles from where I grew up, and like that's where she, you know, like was laid to rest. And so the real aftermath was like almost when the dust settled. It's like when the dust settled, as far as like her funeral was over, like we were navigating like basically like what happens next. You know, this happened at the end of July, so school was coming at the beginning of September. Like, what's that going to look like? And there was just like so many unknowns. Is my dad moving here? Like, what's going on? But like as an individual, the more time went on in like those early days and months, the more it kept setting in on like the damage that it did to me. Like as someone who like witnessed their mother like getting murdered, because that's what it was. And so I struggled like I've never struggled before. And like my mom, I'm not a super emotional person, especially when I was younger. I've certainly softened up since I've had a daughter, but I never was like a really emotional person. It's like because I couldn't release my emotions through tears, I like struggled in like more dark ways. I could not I would just stare at my bedroom door, and it wasn't even my bedroom. It was a bedroom at my grandma's house. I'll just stare at it with like the most irrational thoughts, just thinking like I had myself convinced that my stepdad was going to like break out of jail and he was going to come after me. And I just couldn't, it was so irrational, and I knew that, but it's like I couldn't shake it. Like I couldn't control that. And I would just stare. And my grandma would make coffee every morning, like as people do. And for some reason, the smell of her coffee smelled like gunpowder to me. And it would make me so nauseous. So nauseous. It's, like it was all these little things that were happening where it was like, oh, I can't just like get over this. Like, this actually, it has a much more intense impact than a person could ever comprehend it, like unless it happens to them. Which I found as a teenager to be very frustrating in a lot of ways because, one, I couldn't properly articulate my emotions, and two, I could see other people coping and moving forward, not moving on with their lives, but moving forward with their lives, and I felt like very stuck, where it's like my brain was just on a loop of like just constantly, like everything I had seen, smelt, like it was so fresh that, when someone passes, you start moving forward with your life like as much as you can, but I couldn't. And I held it in like so many ways. At one point I resorted to self-harm. I would take the end off a bobby pin and I would scratch my face because it made, not because I wanted to feel pain, but because it made it feel like, it made me feel seen and like not forgotten about, where it was like, I had all these people like worried about me and like protecting me and loving me, but almost in a way, Ingrid, where they were like afraid because they didn't know what to do. Like this was such uncharted territory for everyone involved, including myself, where it was like, it's almost like I was like desperate to be seen for who I was, like as a person versus like what I had just witnessed. And I think that was very complicated for people because it was, I was a teenager and there was like this, like protecting me was the priority, like as any parent or loved one would. But what I needed was like, no, I need you to understand, like this is still so, I haven't been able to move forward at all. Not even like 1%. And it made me like deeply hurt and angry. Just feel like I felt like so much of my youth, my joy, my like blissful ignorance, as they call it when you're young, had been like stolen from me. And I was dealing with something so heavy that I really didn't know how to deal with it. And I took it out in all these unhealthy ways to try to like get people to understand like how much this was still really impacting me. It took a while, but I did start therapy and I went regularly. I got on some medication for anxiety and depression. And I was just, we were all just figuring out as we went. And in the meantime, it's like, oh, how is my brother, how is my family supposed to just like go back to like what's normal? Like I'll just go to school in a month and just try to act like that didn't just happen. There was no winning in this situation and there was no right way to go about it. And so we just did our best like most people do. And going back to school was intense because it was a similar thing where it's like all of a sudden, instead of Devyn, I was Teresa's daughter. And I became what happened to me instead of like who I was. And that was like a very hard shift because I, again, like as understandable as it was like I was craving so badly to just be treated normally by my friends, my teachers, my family. Obviously that's a very hard thing to do on their end because nothing about what happened to me is normal. And so it was just a really tough position to be in. And I struggled. It was my sophomore year of high school. And a whole year I struggled with panic attacks, anxiety, like deep depression. And I was just trying to like get through the day. I was just trying to get through the day. And I was becoming so impatient with myself because I was like, again, desperate for like a sense of normalcy. And it's like I couldn't get it fast enough. It took so much longer than I ever thought, and a lot of work on my end to kind of heal, like start the healing process, and like accepting the gravity and like the permanency behind what happened. Like there's no undoing it. And I think that was the hardest part, was like there's nothing I can do to bring her back. There's nothing I can do to like erase what I had just seen. And our whole world flipped upside down. Mine did, my brothers did, my families. We were all very close. My family, we're just the community, everything. It was just like catastrophic. Sounds dramatic, but that's what it felt like. So there was some huge shifts in what was normal. I had to like reinvent what was normal for me. I had to actively find ways to cope like in a more healthy sense. So one of those ways where I was just like, my coping is like action. So like I'm a doer. I like go getter. Like, how can I make the world better? And I will say everything that happened is awful, and I would do anything to like get her back. At the same time, I feel this almost like this gratitude for how I'm able to see life now and like the world, where it's like, unfortunately, sometimes it takes something so traumatic to have such an appreciation for your life, understanding how fragile it is, how much of an impact you can make on somebody else's life, and to basically not waste it. And so that's how I found my way to cope. And it was a constant game of like, okay, what would my mom do? Or like, what would she want us to do? And like, that was my guiding light, because it felt like, one, she was still part of my life in some way. And two, it was almost like I can make this horrible thing that happened to us productive in like some way. And that's how we started like moving forward as a family.
Devyn, I usually can keep myself very well composed with hearing these stories, but your story really got me. And, I mean, all the feelings, all the trauma, you went through so much trauma in just one night. I mean, if you just were to just take one piece of what you went through that night, that's enough trauma for one person. But everything that you witnessed, the fact that it was your mom, the fact that you were freaking 14 years old, and to still have like the wherewithal to call 911 and immediately step into action. Of course, you didn't move on. Of course, and I don't think catastrophic is too big of a word. I think that absolutely, when you are a teenager and your mom is taken away from you in such a brutal fashion, catastrophe, that's absolutely the appropriate word. I'm usually not at a loss for words either. Like I can usually talk about anything, but first of all, thank you so much for sharing that, because that is a very difficult thing to share and relive, and including the parts of therapy. I know it's difficult for some people to discuss therapy and the things that you were talking about, your somatic responses to things, the smells and sights and sounds and everything, that is definitely something that a lot of people bury and don't address. I'm also a doer. After feeling that I was okay after my domestic violence relationship, I went into therapy and I was like, let's do this. Let's get it done. I wanted to go in and get out and move on. And unfortunately, that's not how things work. And for lack of something more profound to say, just all of it sucks and none of it's fair.
Right.
I mean, the impact it had on you and your brother and your dad and all of the individuals of your family and your dad's family and the community, none of it is fair. I mean, it's not fair for the teachers to have to try to figure out how to try to make life normal for you. It's not fair for your friends to try to figure out how am I supposed to be a friend and give her some normalcy, but then not act like I'm forgetting about her mom. I mean, none of it is fair.
Mm-hmm.
None of it is fair.
Yeah. And like, it almost felt like an impossible task for everybody.
Yeah.
Like no one was set up for success. And like, what's the best way to go about this? Yeah. So, I mean, I understand that so much better now that I'm older and like I have more insight and like life experience, but the impact still like lives with me. The trauma still lives with me. Like, I can't tell you how many times a week something so benign will trigger my brain like unintentionally, and I'm just like staring at my mom on the dining room floor again.
Ugh.
It's been so long, and it's like, when am I going to shake this? And I will go through these like stints of like nightmares, like night terror, like nightmares where she's never in them, ironically. But it's always me not being able to move, and like I'm watching something really violent happen to somebody I know or love or care about. And it's like, I don't know if there's enough time in like a lifetime for me to like completely heal from those things. So it's just become, for me personally, more how do I best cope with this? Because this is part of who I am now. And I don't need to let it control me. I don't need to let it like ruin my life. It's just part of who I am. And like being able to accept that has made it easier to cope. And it's almost like I took my power back in some ways, where it's like, yeah, this happened, but actually like I get to decide what the rest of my life looks like. I get to decide. And I think more people need to hear that and believe it. Like, it's one thing for someone to tell you, like, you can do anything, you be anything, but you need to believe that and take action for no one but yourself. And knowing that you have so much more power, bravery, compassion than like you ever thought you could. And like, what a gift. Like, what a gift to like live a life more fulfilled with more kindness and like more compassion. And it's just yeah, it's as twisted as it sounds, that I feel lucky in that way. Because I have so much more life left to live, and I get to decide what that looks like. I mean, like, part of that is like thanks to my mom, of course, because that was also like just her attitude, where it was like, I can do whatever I want and I will. And she did, and it was just so admirable. And again, like, I just embody as much of her as I can.
And from things I've been told about you and things that I've read about you, you have been doing that. You organized a walk for your mom.
So I will say I was certainly a helping hand, but my godmother, Cindy, she was the captain of that ship. Like, she drove it. She made sure that I was involved as much as I wanted to be, and that my brother had, that we were like almost acknowledged and included. And I just found it to be, one, very helpful for healing again, because we were like directly impacting, like positively impacting other people's lives, like other survivors of domestic violence. So we had an annual run walk for a decade. It kind of morphed into like, different variations of that. But at the end of the day, for 10 years straight, once a year, we had this huge fundraiser in my mom's honor and her memory, where we would raise funds for our local domestic violence shelter and resource center. And that was also incredibly humbling in a lot of ways, because it made me realize like how fortunate I am to have this like absolute like unit of support when it came to my family and my friends and my community, because not everyone is that lucky. There are so many victims of domestic violence who have been so isolated, they don't have anybody else. And so they have this resource center, they have this shelter, and that's what they have. And so I just felt every year I was reminded like how fortunate I am to like have this like huge group of people behind me. And that not everybody is so lucky. And so being able to bring a little bit more hope, a little bit more resource to other women and their families was really special, like really special. So, yeah, we did a lot happen in 10 years. Graduated high school, went to college, and kind of started that moving forward process with my life. But I still stayed very connected to the domestic violence community, like survivor community. I volunteered at a shelter in college where I would do intakes for like new, I guess you'd say, survivors who like needed to stay at our shelter, giving them resources, restocking, making sure they have what they need. And I did so much silently. I still cared so deeply about this, I guess if you wanted to call it a cause, but honestly, it's an issue because it's preventable, right?
Uh-huh.
And so it's such a deeply rooted issue that it's going to take more than just me to like, quote unquote, fix it. But I will say something I struggled with before coming here today was, I know my friends and my family, some of them will listen to this, and it's like, oh gosh, like I'm going to like expose them to like these details and like this trauma. And for me, what's more important is if I don't talk about it, then who will? Like, who's going to talk about it? And if these details and that my story makes you uncomfortable, I want people to think about that. Think about it. This should be talked about because it shouldn't be happening at all. And the more we bottle it up, and I used to be a professional bottle upper. The more we bottle it up, the more it just goes on quietly and makes it seem like it's okay for these types of things to happen, whether it's your like the worst case scenario, like what happened to my mom, or anything in between. Like, none of it's okay. And I want to make that clear. And so that's just where it's not about my feelings anymore. Like, it's about protecting other people, because this shouldn't happen to anybody else.
You're absolutely right. I think so many people, when it comes to either those who have witnessed domestic violence or have experienced it, are afraid to speak. I mean, there's some legitimate fear because of a fear of repercussions. But then there's also the fear of, what is everyone else going to think? And how is this going to make everybody feel? And I don't care anymore. It should make people feel uncomfortable. It's not a comfortable situation. And the fact that people are living this day in and day out and, just holding on every day, just trying to survive, it should feel uncomfortable to understand that people are doing that there are children in the homes that are witnessing these things happen. I wanted to say, like, this whole episode has me so emotional, like, for so many different reasons. But I sit and I wonder if I ever crossed paths with your mom. I think we were not that far apart in age. How old would she be today?
Today, she would be, I'm not estimate, in her early 50s.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I'm 48. I'm class of 95. So I feel like we may have, crossed paths at some point. But I never knew her. I can say I never knew her personally. But the way you described her and everything that you have done, this is the part that's getting me emotional. You were embodying her spirit. Everything that you described about her as far as this beautiful person, everything that you have done is that. I mean, I would just, when you said you have never met another person like her, you need to take a look in the mirror. To be honest, because I mean, the incredible work that you're doing, despite the trauma that you went through, that you're going through to help other people, to be part of that walk as freaking high school kid, the stuff that you went through and the things that you have done, the fact that you're raising a daughter, and you're keeping your mom's memory alive, you coming on this podcast, all of this is so incredibly strong and so incredibly important. And just even telling the worst story of your life, you still emit this like light about you that you pull people in. And I want to thank you for that. And I hope that you realize what an incredible woman you are.
Appreciate that. It's like the best compliment ever. It really is. Yeah, I appreciate that a lot. And I just hope that someone else feels like seen and heard. And that the thing about like domestic violence is it just like, it doesn't look a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone on the street walking by would not guess that about me. And like, that's part of my point, is because like people of all types of people are dealing with this, and they're dealing with it like silently. That's like a huge part of the problem, is like they're dealing with it silently. So I'm just like flattered that I can be at least one more voice that's not so silent, and that hopefully, if nothing else, it empowers like another woman to know that like she's just so much braver and stronger than she like gives herself credit for. I just want more women to like not only hear that but believe it.
Yeah. Before we close, is there anything that you wanted to share that we didn't touch on?
I mean, I'm like I said earlier, like I could talk about her. I could talk about the impact of this all for forever. Like it's because it really has never like left my life. I will say that a wound has like opened for me that I didn't even know I was gonna have. My mom has been gone for like so many of my life events, whereas like graduating high school, graduating college, getting married, like huge life events. And then, last September, I had my daughter. And becoming a mother myself has almost like picked the scab that I didn't even know I had. And it's like so raw. Like this is easily the hardest thing I've done without her. It's so difficult to be a mom without your mom. Especially when you're like learning how to do it. So I really like leaned on my circle, my community. And it just made me like really reflect on how many other women who have kids who are in this situation that also feel like alone in a lot of ways. And I just want you to hear that you're not. There's so many people who care and are like willing to help. You just have to be brave enough to ask, which is something that I'm working on myself.
Same.
I'm not super good at that, but I'm working on it, and I just want to like lead by example, honestly. And like if you're listening to this and you feel like you're doing it all alone and like you're just protecting your kids, like you don't have to do it alone. That's the thing, is like there's no real reward like for doing it alone, other than it's just really hard. So lean on your people and find your people to lean on. Reach out and ask. You deserve the help. And you're no less of a mother for asking for it. So that's one other thing that I really wanted to share, because I know how many other women who are maybe too proud or too scared to ask for help. And if anything, I think it makes you a stronger person for knowing that you actually not only don't have to do it all, but you shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can doesn't mean you should. So just lean on your people, lean on your community. You're already doing a great job. That's another thing I need other moms to hear is, especially moms who are in unhealthy relationships or violent situations, like, you are doing an amazing job. You're an amazing mother. So don't be afraid to ask for help.
Mm-hmm. I actually tell my daughter, she's very independent. She's young. And I always tell her I appreciate her independence, but I say, the strongest people ask for help. And I had told I still go to therapy, but I told my therapist this, and she said, can you say that out loud one more time for yourself to hear? Because it is a very difficult thing to do. I am a definitely do-it-yourselfer person, but yeah, those are really, really important things for people to hear. Domestic violence situation or not, motherhood is difficult.
Yes.
I think there's an expectation that you're supposed to have this automatic gut feeling of knowing what to do and this motherly, this motherly instinct. And I remember when I first had my child, I was like, where is that? And how come I didn't get it? But you bring so many good points, so many definite take home messages, but is there one specific strength or message that you would want to leave with listeners today?
I would say more than anything, just don't give up on yourself. And you are so worthy of a healthy and safe life, and one where you find your own joy and fulfillment. So while it might feel like other people might give up on you, just don't ever give up on yourself, and keep trying, keep moving, going forward, keep pushing. So you are just so stronger than you think you are.
Okay. And then just before we say goodbye, do you want to say your mom's name just so everybody can?
Teresa.
Teresa.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Devyn.
Thank you, Ingrid. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you again for joining me today, Devyn, and thank you, warriors, for listening. I will be back next week with another episode for you. Until then, stay strong, and wherever you are in your journey, always remember, you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1in3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1in3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.